For those of you who have joined us, welcome. I'm so excited about our first Friday today. We're going to walk you through Minnesota's brand new tax credit incentive. Before we do that, I just want to, as people are logging in, I just want to say it is October in Minnesota, and it's absolutely gorgeous for those of you who are not in Minnesota. I was up in Duluth the last couple of days at the Catalyst Content Festival, which continues through the weekend. And then starting the 8th in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis St. Paul Film Society Cine Latino begins. Which will be presenting some of the best Spanish language films from around the world. And then at the end of the month, the 21st, 22nd, the Twin Cities International Film Festival begins. So it's a great month to be in Minnesota, although it's always great to be in Minnesota. So today we are joined by, of course, Jill Johansson, from our office, our incentive specialist, and also joined by Stefan Wolf from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And Stefan has been just our partner in all things incentive over the last 5 years, and has been working so hard on getting this tax credit up and running. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jill and Stefan to kind of walk through this new program. I would urge you, please, please, please ask questions. Use the Q&A function or the chat function, and I'll be monitoring those, and we will get to all those questions after the presentation. But throw those in anytime. And so, guys, take it away.
Well, first of all, I just want to welcome everybody. I am so glad that after all this time, we finally can offer a tax credit to makers here in Minnesota. I'm very excited about that. And I'm very excited to have Stefan Wolf, my partner in crime, if you will, here to walk us through the process. So I'm just going to go right ahead and hand it over to you, Stefan.
All right, sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Stefan Wolf, and I work for DEED. Jill, do you want to pull up the PowerPoint?
Sure.
And then so some of you may be familiar with who we are, some of you may not. So I'll just give you a real quick overview of kind of what we do. So we are the state's principal economic development arm. And go ahead, Jill.
Sorry.
And so we're organized kind of in a hub and spoke model, if you will. There's really multiple divisions that provide different services. You're probably familiar with our workforce services division. You can think of like unemployment insurance, things like that. We have a workforce development who helps people transition from one career to another career. And I work in the one that's economic development. And so what we do here, go ahead, Jill. And so what we do in economic development is we work with businesses from formation through growth, through expansion. That's kind of our role. And we have a couple different tools that we use in our toolbox. Those could be grants, loans, in this case, tax credits. But what some folks don't know is we also provide additional professional technical services through our small business development centers, which we help thousands of people a year either start business or grow business or take their ideas and make it a real business. Go ahead, Jill. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the tax credit. I think we need to go back one, Jill. The tax credit was authorized by the 2021 legislature. What it does is it provides $5 million in funding per year for the current year plus 3 additional years. And the benefit is it's a transferable 25% tax credit for projects that spend at least $1 million or more in production costs in a specific tax year. We're taking these applications on a first come, first served basis. We allocate credits as the requests are received. Go ahead, Jill. And then so eligible projects, you might, if you're familiar with the rebate program, this might look a little bit familiar to you. And that's because it's part of the same legislation. The foundation of the program is. So eligible products will include, feature films, television or internet pilot programs or series, documentaries, commercials and music videos. So like I said earlier, this program, you must have at least $1 million in a tax year to be eligible. It's a jobs program. So of course you need to hire Minnesota residents. What's key is that you'll want to apply at least 30 days, but no more than 90 days to beginning principal photography. That's one of the takeaways from my presentation. Make sure you apply in the appropriate amount of time. We're going to ask for, it's really a pretty simple application. We're going to ask for some supporting documentation to make sure that the project is really ready to go before we tie up these funds. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to ask that the project is at least 75% funded. One of the requirements is that you promote Minnesota within the end credits. So you'll have to agree to do so through a static or animated logo, which we will publish on our website probably the next 30 or 60 days. And you'll do that before the below the line crew crawl. So the list of eligible expenses are much more detailed than what's listed here. This is just a high level overview. For the first one, think about like location expenses, health and safety, equipment and testing, studio and soundstage rental, sets, props, wardrobes, including construction materials, lodging, food, catering, transportation, insurance. Think of all those things that kind of fall under direct costs of production. And then also, related services, like legal and accounting, payroll, other professional services. The key to this slide that you want to take away is that any compensation that's paid to a Minnesota resident is going to be eligible towards that spend, therefore eligible for the tax credit also. For above the line compensation, it's going to be capped at 10% for directors and producers if they're a Minnesota resident. And so make that distinction that if they're a Minnesota resident or non-Minnesota resident. And then if they're above the line compensation to non-residents, which are producers, directors, or acting talent, it's capped at 5% of the total project. But notice that it's just for directors and producers. We want to make sure that we support you in bringing the talent that you need to bring your project to Minnesota. Therefore, it's not capped for acting talent. Again, also, additional expenses that you'll need to incur in Minnesota, short-term office rental, digital media storage, and other housing allowance, things like that. The key takeaway there is anything that you incur in Minnesota and pay to a Minnesota company that does business here is going to be eligible for the tax credit. So there's some nomenclature that looks very similar, and I just want to point that out. And I underlined them both. And that's a credit allocation certificate and a tax credit certificate. So as I stated earlier, we allocate credits on a rolling basis. The biggest thing you'll take away today from me is that you must do two things before you begin principal photography if you want a tax credit. The first one is schedule the consultation with Minnesota Film and TV Board. What they will do is they will make sure that your project is a good fit for the program. They'll also be able to answer any questions or assist you in bringing your project to Minnesota. And the second thing is you have to apply the deed and obtain a credit allocation certificate. Once you do that, everything else will just kind of fall in line. But what happens next is you'll do your project. You'll notify us that you started your project. You'll complete your project. You'll commission an independent audit. It must be from a licensed CPA in the state of Minnesota. And then you'll submit that report along with a financial production economic impact report. And most likely your auditor that's going to be compiling your report for you will just fill it out on your behalf. And most importantly, you'll provide that information to us. We'll then issue a tax credit certificate, and then you can either assign the credit or claim the credit from that point. And so we published a very detailed list of on our website, on our program webpage. There's multiple tabs there. There's 5 in total. There you'll be able to see everything from our eligibility to expenses, how to apply. But what I would challenge you to look at also is the industry resources and incentives. There are a number of other programs that you may be able to use concurrently along with this tax credit, as an incentive to do your project here. The link that says application guide, that'll tell you what you need to provide to us. It's kind of like a checklist. There's some supporting documentation for your project that you'll have to provide, but that's a good thing maybe to print out as you consider moving forward with your project. That's it, Jill. I'm going to pass it back to you, and hopefully we've got some questions.
We do. One thing for everyone, if you didn't get that information from the last slide, we can email out, we will email out to everyone that information after today's webinar. One clarification, this came in as a question, the $5 million in credits is per year. So we have 5 million for this calendar year, this tax year, 2021. If those are not used in the next couple of months, that will roll over and we will have 10 million available in 2022. So there's 5 million for each year. There are a couple of questions about commercials, and I'm going to hold those because that could be a larger conversation. But we do have a question about schedule. If the schedule is pushed for some reason and it suddenly, your shoot date gets delayed, which happens a lot, as we know, do you have to reapply? Do you file for an extension? Is it going to be a case by case? How's that going to be handled?
That's an excellent question, and thank you for bringing that forward. So as we're rolling the program out, we did allow a 30-day extension to be requested. So, since this is it's allocated on a first come first served basis, our thought process was that it would be best to allow one extension upon request. And then if for some reason your project still doesn't go forward, at that point, you're going to need to reapply and receive a new allocation certificate. And so the availability for that next allocation would be dependent upon available credits. And that's just so it's fair and equitable for everybody that is going to have a project here. But great question.
Okay. Yes, there's a question about transferability. Yes, the tax credit is transferable. It cannot be converted into cash by the state, but you can sell it, transfer it on the market. And there are companies, brokers that work in this sphere, Tax Credits International, the big companies like Entertainment Partners, Cast and Crew, all of these companies can help you either finance against your tax credits or just transfer them at the end of the process.
Can I ask a related, I'm sorry,
yes.
I didn't cut you off there, Melody. I have a related question actually that came up that I got previously. And somebody asked, because this is by calendar year currently, and this is a question for you, Stefan, does the work and the reporting have to take place by the end of the calendar year? Or if the project is complete and the audit falls into January, How does that work? Is that still an eligible project then?
Yeah, another good question. So since it's a tax credit, you need to incur and pay for all the expenses in that tax year.
Okay.
So, the reporting and the audit, we know that may fall into the subsequent year. Again, it's when you incur the expenses. So
Okay, good.
when we're going to look at it two different times. We're going to look at the application period. When you apply, will all of your expenses occur that you plan in that time period? And if the answer is yes, we're going to move forward with the application. If the answer is that half will be in 1 year and half will be in the next, unfortunately, it's not going to meet that threshold, and we'll have a further discussion at that time.
A related question to the transferability. Do we assist producers in finding companies that are interested in buying those credits? No, but the brokers that I mentioned before will take care of that. That is its own field. And as we are updating our website, I'm sure that we can list some of those companies on our website, which is being redone. So be patient with us while we go through that rebuild process. So let's dive into some commercial questions, because I know that we do have some commercial producers on. So it's mostly about timing. Most commercials don't have the luxury of 30 days before they start shooting. I would add that most commercials are not going to meet the $1 million minimum spend, right, Jill?
Not most, but many.
Right. So is there any exception for commercials that want to take advantage of the tax credit, or is 30 days an absolute?
Yeah, the 30-day hurdle isn't really absolute. The reason we put the 30 days out there is so that there's enough time to review your application and make a determination. So I would not discourage you from applying if it's under the 30 days. But know that if you submit it today, we're not going to give you an answer tomorrow. There's just not possible. The other potential hurdle that you may encounter with a commercial is the requirement for displaying the logo. So you'll want to think about that, how you'll overcome that obstacle, because by statute, it says it must be displayed for 5 seconds. So
I will add, though, that commercials can still apply for the Minnesota production rebate. And that is first come, first served for commercials, although everybody else has to go through a review process on the monthly application deadline. Commercials may apply at any time, as long as we have funds available in the commercial purse. And you don't have to apply too far in advance for that, but just give me a day or two.
Yeah. Okay. Question, is the minimum spend an aggregate across multiple projects or one project?
another good question. It's going to be one project.
What about what about episodic or a series of commercials?
Yeah, I think episodic would definitely count if it's a season. And then a series of commercials, if you're doing them all as one project, then we would consider that, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, this is great. Somebody said, I love this. In other states for commercials, states allow a tweet or social media post in lieu of including the logo. Mm-hmm. Is this a possibility? That I have never seen that, but thank you for telling us that. Unfortunately, right now, it is not a possibility because of the way the statute was written. But do know that we are already in discussion about making some tweaks in the language of the statute this legislative session, which starts in January, to clarify some things and clear up some of this language that and issues like this. So stay tuned for that during the legislative session. Let's see, is the transfer dollar for dollar, or is it a percentage?
Another good question. So within the last week, I was in additional conversation with the Department of Revenue. So our Department of Revenue is the fiscal agent who will issue the actual, handles the claiming of the credit. And their position as of today is they will publish guidance when they publish their 2021 tax forms. It's my understanding that they're going to handle this transferability similar to the historic tax credit. And so the direct answer to your question is it's going to be transferable one time in one allocation, one shot. Now, if that's preliminary, and that may change, but like I said, once those 2021 forms are published, we'll put additional guidance on our website that will link you to where you need to go with Department of Revenue.
Okay. Well, we have gotten through all of the questions that are submitted, but please, if you have other questions, please chime in. Jill, anything that you want to add?
Sure, I would love to add, Stefan touched on it a little bit, that there are other incentive programs available in the state that you may already know about that you can use with the tax credit. Now, just so you know, the Minnesota production rebate, the cash incentive, may not be used in conjunction with the tax credit. It's one or the other. So you can pick that top level credit, but then we do have a number of regional credits that can be stacked and used in any combination with either one of those top choices. So you do have the ability to receive a little extra bang for your buck, depending on where you want to shoot.
Great. That's a great point. We have a question here, and I'm going to read it to make sure I get this right. Regarding the organizational chart between the state and the film industry, who's sitting on each side of the negotiating table, then turning that agreement into legislation? Is the board of directors in charge of representing the industry, or is there an agent acting on behalf of our industry? So I think that's more about the legislative process. Robert, if you want to chime in and clarify a little bit, are you talking about the sort of the legislative process, the lobbying? That would be helpful to be able to answer that question. Because I'm not quite sure. It has been, I can just tell you how things worked this past legislative session. We had a broad coalition of industry folks, independent producers and directors, and our office, other nonprofits that work within the industry. The labor unions were a huge part of this process this year. So it was really a cross section. And this group did, as other folks who are trying to get legislation through, did hire a lobbyist that worked on that. And worked with individual legislators to craft the legislation. Of course, at a certain point in the legislative process, it's kind of out of the hands of the advocates, and it is that in the hands of the legislators, which, you know, as you can imagine, where we started, what we wanted is not what got passed, of course. We were looking for more credits for a longer sunset, Those things got changed in committee. And we hope, our goal is to make this program incredibly successful, bring in some great projects, create great jobs, and go back to the legislature and be able to expand this program as we move forward. So I hope that answers your question. If not, please chime back in or just get in touch with me separately anytime. That's fine. Somebody needs clarification. If I have 300,000 in tax credits, I then go to, say, Cast and Crew, and they negotiate with a company buying the tax credits. What is the usual price that is paid per dollar? Has anybody looked at the price lately?
I'm not sure of the going rate right now.
Yeah.
I know in the past it was like 80 or 85 cents on the dollar, but I don't know what the current rates are.
Yeah, it does fluctuate. It is, like I said, it is a market, and it will never be, you'll never get 100% on the dollar. You're, selling it for 80 to 95 cents on the dollar generally. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Jill or Stefan, anything else that questions have brought up?
Yeah, somebody in the chat, I actually just flipped over and saw that there's a question there asking how the tax credit differs from the Minnesota production rebate. And the difference is the Minnesota production rebate, number one, has a lower minimum spend. That's $100,000 minimum spend. And that is a monthly application deadline. And those deadlines are posted on our website. The next deadline is October 20th. As I'm thinking, I think it's the 20th at 5 p.m. And that is up to 25% cash reimbursement. So you go through a very similar process to the tax credit where you fill out an application. That application is then reviewed. In this case, it's scored. And if you achieve the score we're looking for, you will be certified. And then when your project is complete, you will turn in expenses. We will audit those expenses in our office and then issue you a check for the eligible expenses. So that's the difference. It's a similar process, a similar program with a lesser spend and lesser overall funds available as well. There's only $500,000 per year in that. And right now for this year, we have about $115,000 left. And then the next installment of money would have to be paid after July 1. And that again is about $500,000.
So I have a question. Stefan, have you received the program is live now, right?
Yeah, we did our soft launch, I think the 15th of last month, knowing that it's a big lift to be able to get a project up and running this tax year. But we are officially taking applications for next year as of today. And then what I'm hoping, or what my ask is that even if your project doesn't fit for this program, help us get the word out with your network. I think that this program could be very successful in helping jumpstart some projects here in the state, but help us get the word out. So that's my ask.
That's great. A couple more questions. Will we be able to see once the program starts getting used, will producers be able to see a running total of how many credits have been allocated, how many are left?
Yeah, on the main landing page of the program page, there's an introductory paragraph, and below that's where we'll track the status of the credits that are available. And we'll update that probably on a weekly basis. If there's a large project that comes through, of course, we're going to update that right away. So
And I just want to reiterate too, that the funds for this year, if they're unused, they will carry forward into the next calendar year for the tax credit.
Mhm. Right. There was a question about the status of the rebate program. It was this past legislative session, 2021, was a budget session. Minnesota budgets on the biennium. So it's a 2-year cycle. The production rebate was funded, they appropriated the same thing that they have for the last 2 biennia, $500,000 per fiscal year. So $1 million for the biennial budget. We hope that that program continues. We will certainly advocate for it, and we will always advocate for more. So yes, I think that, I mean, to my mind, these 2 programs are serve such different users that I think it's important that we do have both. The tax credit program is ultimately, the larger budget projects, hopefully to bring in some outside projects that will spend a whole lot of money and create some new jobs. With the rebate program being, it works so well for commercials and post-production and the lower budget indie films that it has been supporting over the years, that we would like to keep both of those programs going. Okay. I think I've covered all of the questions. If I haven't, please, somebody jump in and let me know. So Jill.
Yes.
Has your office been getting calls about this?
I have been getting tons of calls and emails about both programs. There's been a lot of interest in the tax credit, and we are all crossing fingers that some of the large and well-known or well-hiring projects will actually end up coming here. We're looking forward to that.
Great. We have a question in the chat. Can I, as a filmmaker, own a studio and commercial equipment rental business and use them for billing of expenses for my own films? Can they count toward the $1 million minimum spend? You see what I'm asking, Jill?
I think if I'm interpreting that question correctly, you cannot bill internally.
Right. You can't charge yourself for equipment that you already own.
Right. Capital purchases are not eligible. And so theoretically, if you own all that equipment, you cannot bill the state for that. It has to be a paid invoice that's being paid outside of your own organization.
Right. Okay. Any other things that you would like people to know or be aware of? Any kind of sort of red flag issues that from the questions you've been getting on phone calls, Jill?
I would say pay attention to the dates, pay attention to all the information that is on the website. The one thing that was new to me was the tax clearance letter from the Department of Revenue. Stefan, can you address that a little bit and just explain, because that was something I was unfamiliar with myself.
I can. And
thank you.
So what a tax clearance letter is basically just a letter from the Department of Revenue that verifies that your business entity is current on all its tax obligations. For any tax credit program that we stand up at deed, we always require one of those. I think, one of our requirements in the application process is that you have obtained one. It can take a few weeks to receive one back. So my advice would be this: don't let the inability of you to have received the tax clearance letter prevent you from filing your application. And we may provide additional clearance on that later if we come into a situation where it's taken an abnormal amount of time to obtain those. But just know that we're not going to issue an allocation certificate until we know that the business is current on all of its obligations.
That makes sense. There's a follow-up on the equipment rental question. If the production entity is renting from that other entity, wouldn't that cover it from a capital equipment rental perspective? Our point, I think, is that if you own equipment, you cannot rent that equipment to yourself and claim that as an expense. So if it's, if you're renting equipment from a Minnesota business, of course, that will be covered. But if you own the equipment, you can't rent it from yourself. That's the point. Oh, and a really important question, Stefan, who signed the football?
Oh, that's a good question. In 2015, I was at a combine, and Joe Montana and Dan Marino were throwing footballs to us. So that is one that I caught from Joe Montana. And yes, he still has an arm.
Very impressive. Oh, good. Here's a great question. Does the film need to be set up as a business entity in the state of Minnesota, or can it be established elsewhere?
Yeah, you can organize your entity in any state that you would like. However, you must be registered with our Secretary of State to conduct business in the state of Minnesota.
Great. Easy. Okay. All right, other questions? Well, do know that we will email out, I'm not stopping, please keep sending questions if you think of things. We will email out to everyone all of the information that was covered in the PowerPoint presentation with all of the links. You can find all links to all of this information on the Minnesota Film and TV website, but the application itself lives on DEED's website because it is a state program. Let's see. Here's a great question. Is there a threshold of percentage of the film that would need to be shot in the state in case of a multi-state location shoot? That's a great question.
For the tax credit?
I answer for both, yeah.
Oh, well, for the tax credit, you have to spend a minimum of $1 million. So right now, there is no percentage requirement for that. And actually, the same holds true for the Minnesota production rebate. As long as you're spending $100,000 minimum, then your project, theoretically, if you meet the other requirements, is eligible. Where you would get a bump with the production rebate, that's the cash rebate, if you're shooting more than 60% of your days outside of the metro, the 7-county metro. So if you shoot the entirety of your project in Duluth, let's say, then that will qualify you at the 25% level of reimbursement.
Great. And salary caps. Can we talk about salary caps?
We can try. There, as Stefan mentioned, the tax credit does cap in certain situations. And that is, I have to pull it up to actually look at it. So just give me 1 second here so I can actually look at what I need to say. Unless Stefan, you want to talk about the tax credit and I can address the rebate part.
Yeah, sure. So for the tax credit, break it into 3 different groups. If they're below the line, any resident of Minnesota, you'll receive a rebate on it. But the question really is about above the line and below the line positions. So for above the line positions, you're either a Minnesota resident or you're not a Minnesota resident. If you're a Minnesota resident and you're above the line, it's a 10% cap for producer or director. Okay.
10% of the project budget, 10% of the spend.
Of the qualified spend.
Okay.
Yes. So if it's $1 million project, there's going to be 10% cap. So you can only receive $100,000 for their salaries cumulatively.
Okay.
10%. And then so for above line compensation paid to a non-resident producer, director, or producer or director, it's going to be 5%.
Okay.
So
And
10%, non-resident 5%. Again, we're trying to incentivize hiring Minnesotans.
Yeah.
So for the rebate, the cash rebate, your Minnesota residents are eligible. For your non-resident, you are allowed 1 non-resident above the line producer and 1 non-resident above the line director, and any non-resident above the line principal acting talent as up to $100,000 in reimbursement per person, as long as Minnesota taxes are withheld.
mm-hmm.
So theoretically, you're looking at the first $400,000 or $500,000 of salary, which sounds outrageous right at this moment in time, but that's where you're getting your either 20 or 25% back, so that those max out at $100,000 per person.
Right.
Additionally, for feature film, if a person, one of your non-resident above the line producer director is also, say, an actor in your film, only 1 position is eligible for reimbursement. So 1 individual can only be reimbursed once in that situation. And the producer director's salary is capped at 3% of the total submitted eligible Minnesota spend.
Great.
Melody,
Is there?
Melody,
Yeah.
can I add one thing too?
Yeah, please.
So for the tax credit, we make that final determination before we issue the tax credit allocation. Okay, so before your project starts. So all parties will be well aware of what counts and what doesn't count. So it's not ambiguous after you file your application.
Great.
And I would say the same goes for the reimbursement program as well, that if your application is certified, we will meet with you and tell you exactly how much is the maximum you will receive back.
Great. Great. Is there withholding on loan outs?
Loan outs do need to register. How the state handles that outside of our office is, I believe, up in the air at the moment.
Can you guys define loan out for me? Because I'm not familiar with that nomenclature. Perhaps I know it as something else.
It's basically a company that loans out your talent. So, you're not paying Brad Pitt, you're paying his B+ productions.
Okay, and that's different than a professional employment organization.
I believe
PEO.
so.
Okay. What's important for us with the tax credit is that the work that's done here, that the wages have proper withholding, and that is remitted to the state of Minnesota if they wanted to count towards the tax credit. If they don't, it's illegal work. We're not going to incentivize that.
Easy. All right. Other questions, other things, other comments? So is there anyone on this call who has a project they're planning to apply for the tax credit program? Love to see you chime in here and know what we might be expecting. Yes. Yes. Oh, fantastic. Good. We do have some potential applicants. Well, know that that Jill, Stefan, and myself, we are all very, very approachable, very easy to talk to, and happy to talk you through any questions, any of the materials. And in fact, you're required to talk to Jill and I before you apply anyway. So, oh, and one of you, oh my goodness, that is so great to hear. Stefan, this is going to make you happy. An expat who moved out of the state, so happy to have a financially sound plan to produce back home. That is what we want to hear. All of those folks that have moved out to LA, moved to Atlanta over the last 5 or 10 years. We want you to come home. Minnesota needs your creativity, and we need you to help rebuild the industry here. So get back here. Oh, from Chicago too. Oh, here's a question. This is for me. Question about where the Gibsons are, the guitars. I've done webinars from a different room where there are guitars lined up behind me. Those are upstairs. This is my office. So, but they're still there. All right. Oh, now, Jill, you have to tell us about the tapestry now.
Oh, it was a wedding gift from relatives in Norway.
Very nice. All right. Anything else? Well, we might be through unless something comes in. Any closing thoughts, Stefan?
Reach out to us with questions. I want to reiterate what you said, Melly, about being approachable. Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, I'll make one more plug. Please share this information with your network to help us expand our reach at D. Thank you.
Jill?
As most of you know who are on there, go ahead and give me a holler. Email is quicker usually, but I am available to answer your questions. And also please keep in mind, this program is brand new. So we're all kind of going through this together for the first time. And it'll take a little bit to get it up and running, but we're ready to go. We've been waiting a long time. So we're glad it's here and ready to make it work.
Great. And of course, somebody throws in a question as we're wrapping up that boy, if I start down this road, we'll be here for an hour. The question is, will there be a time that Deed will sort of combine with Minnesota Film and TV or vice versa? That is such a great question. For some of you who are outside of Minnesota or not familiar with our local industry community, Minnesota Film and TV, although it serves as a state film commission in many respects, it is not a state agency. We are the only film office, the only state film office in the country that is a 501c3 nonprofit. I think that is not the best model. And I have started having conversations with DEED at the commissioner level and at the legislative affairs level about the possibility of Minnesota launching an actual film commission that is a state agency. I just think that that is a much better model, given the way the industry has changed and the fact that that the industry is so incentive driven. One thing that the reason you have our organization and DEED working on this together is that unlike the rebate program, which our office administers pretty much completely, but under DEED's supervision, tax credits can only be issued by government agencies. So other states that have tax credit programs, if you've worked in other states and worked on tax credits, you've worked with the State Film Commission. We can't issue tax credits because we're not a state agency. So that is one of the next steps, I think, for the growth of Minnesota's industry, is to have a state film commission. And we'll do a webinar just on that at some point in the future, but we are definitely looking at that road. Yes, thank you, Abdi. That was great. Yes, we are, Julie. We are recording this session, and we will get this posted hopefully by the end of the day today. We'll see how busy things get. But if we don't have any questions, I look forward to hearing from all of you, whether you're going to be applying for the tax credit or the rebate, or just have some questions. Thank you, Stefan, for being such a fantastic partner to us, and for your incredibly steep learning curve on film production tax credits this year. Thank you. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and hope everyone gets out and enjoys this beautiful October in Minnesota. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.